These people are in our society. They're cannibals. They're monsters. They're human devils. They're evil. The Heuermanns are part of that package.
A strange and often disturbing news conference was held last week, suggesting the family of accused Gilgo Beach serial killer Rex Heuermann of also showing interest in these savage crimes. We're breaking down these latest allegations and whether there's really anything there. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Hey there, everybody. This is a Law&Crime legal alert. Google Incognito tracked users' browsing data without their knowledge. Yep, well, Mass Tort Alliance, one of our legal sponsors, is helping users file for compensation due to Google users' privacy issues surrounding Google Incognito. So if you've used Google Incognito anytime since 2016, you can start your claim in less than 10 questions at incognitoclaims.com/sidebar. We've been following updates on the case of the suspected Gilgo Beach, Long Island serial killer. But now, Manhattan architect Rex Heuermann is no longer accused of just killing the Gilgo Four. No, prosecutors have charged the 60-year-old with the murders of two more women, Jessica Taylor in 2003 and Sandra Castillo back in 1993. So now we're talking a suspected murder spree going back even further, going back into the 90s. Now, Heuermann had already been charged with the murders of Maureen Brainerd Barnes, Amber Costello, Megan Barthelemy, and Megan Waterman. All of those women's bodies were found near the Gilgo Beach shoreline, hence the name. But it wasn't until last year that police finally announced that they had a suspect and arrested Heuermann. He's pleaded not guilty. He remains locked up. But let's not forget that it was actually the search for Shannan Gilbert, who went missing in 2010, that led to the discovery of nearly a dozen bodies at Gilgo Beach and started all this investigation. Now, prosecutors say that Heuermann's DNA and the DNA of family members is connected to hairs that were found on the victims' bodies. That's been a major piece of evidence. The task force in Suffolk County recently did a second search of Heuermann's home, reportedly focusing more on the basement. Law enforcement has carted out boxes and boxes, even searching the backyard. Ray Tierney, the lead prosecutor on this case, the DA, said that investigators seized 350 electronic devices, everything from hard drives to cell phones to USBs, even hundreds of floppy disks. They reportedly even found a planning document on how to kill and discard of bodies. So we can only imagine what evidence would be presented at a future trial of Rex Heuermann. But Mr. Tierney says that a lot of what the task force has found with the help of the Secret Service is also violent torture porn, which shows things that seem to coincide with the remains of at least 3 women that were discovered. Now, with that as a backdrop, we have to talk about this new update. And it concerns New York lawyer John Ray. So John Ray represents the family of Shannan Gilbert, who I mentioned before. Now, he and her loved ones believe that she too was a victim of Rex Heuermann while she was working as a sex worker. But to be clear, Heuermann has not been charged in connection with her specific death, which was declared an accident. Nonetheless, Ray and his team, they have continued their own investigation not only into Rex Heuermann, but also his family, Heuermann's wife, Asa Ellerup, and their now adult daughter, Victoria. Heuermann also has an adult son, Christopher, who is not named during this press conference, but let's take a listen.
I'm in pursuit of Shannan Gilbert's killers and the full truth and the facts and circumstances surrounding all of these murders, as I've been from the beginning. I represent that family, the Gilbert family, and I represent several victims' families of Rex Heuermann who survived him and were attacked by him or stalked by him. So I'm not here today, by the way, to just speak about exclusively about Shannan, but I'm here to speak about what we have discovered regarding one of the children and the implications of that for the family.
Yeah, so last week, Ray held a news conference to discuss a bevy of circumstantial evidence that his team uncovered. Now, to be clear, circumstantial evidence isn't direct proof that something happened. But as we well know, if you have enough circumstantial evidence, it can certainly lead to an arrest. It can lead to a conviction. But to be clear, what Ray asserts and what we're about to get into, these are just allegations at this point. It's also not entirely clear what to make of it. We should also tell you that no charges have been filed against Victoria or Asa, and there's no evidence that she or Asa or anyone in the family is under investigation by law enforcement in any way. Why? Well, Suffolk County prosecutors have said repeatedly that they do not believe Heuermann's family was involved in any way with these crimes. In fact, there's evidence that they were out of town when the murders were committed. But Ray has long believed that there is no way Heuermann's family didn't know what he was up to, or what he allegedly was up to. Remember, according to charging documents, Heuermann often visited prostitutes and was interested in brutal pornography. If prosecutors are correct about that, Heuermann has been killing women and chopping up their bodies for decades, so how could it be possible that his family didn't know? That's a fair question. Having said that, though, how many times do we see cases where people do lead double lives and their families are none the wiser? Putting that to the side, many people involved in this case, including attorneys for some of the victims, they have blasted Mr. Ray for this news conference, calling it reckless, ill-conceived, just flat out false. So what we're going to do is we're going to play you some of the comments made by John Ray. Let's take a listen.
Rex Heuermann's porn is matched by his daughter's tastes, his daughter's work. You will see that we are not talking here about, what should I call it, merely murder. I say it ironically. We're talking about people who are involved and interested in torture, horrifying torture of the people we know are now dead, and many more yet to come. We are talking about the potentiality of cannibalism, hard vor. We are talking about the use of porno to effect what has happened.
Okay, this is the first time we have ever heard mention of cannibalism in connection with these already gruesome deaths. So how did that come up? Well, much of the news conference focuses on Victoria and her activity online. And while Ray's team says most of Victoria's online presence has been scrubbed, her Tumblr page still had content. Ray handed out packets to reporters at the news conference that contained photos of artwork connected to that Tumblr page. Much of it is just way too graphic to show you here, but Ray's team seems to be trying to make the connection between Heuermann's apparently deviant lifestyle and the culture that his daughter was allegedly immersed in. But by the way, only one of the pieces of graphic or violent artwork shown was actually created by Victoria. That was according to Ray. That piece apparently depicted a person who was half-eaten. The other pieces were posted to Tumblr pages that Victoria simply followed. Ray says Victoria followed many content creators that posted sadistic and cannibalistic things. So you can see how he's trying to make a connection here, or you can see how he's seemingly trying to make a connection here. And then Ray also commented on how Victoria presents herself to the media.
The evidence that we have suggests that we've been sold a story by the Heuermann family. Take a look at the first page and the picture that's to the right. That's Victoria Heuermann as she tried to appear to the press when you first confronted her at the home in Massapequa Park. There she is in her little girl's uniform. She's 27 years old with a school bag draped over her. Her hair in a nice little bun. Very innocent looking person. The other picture is also Victoria Heuermann, as she really is, as she portrays herself on the internet, as she actually looks. We've been sold a bill of goods. If you look at her artwork, in the top page, her artwork consists that she posted online of a human skull. That's just the beginning. After the indictments, oddly enough, and you folks took the picture, you see Victoria Heuermann walking out, I believe from her house. And I thought it was odd when I saw it. But you'll notice she's wearing a shirt that depicts, right after her father is indicted, for these murdered women, it depicts a human skeleton. That's what she's wearing. This appears to be the remains of a human being that looks half-eaten. Remember that Victoria Heuermann is on the internet reading words and looking at pictures that deal with hard vor. That is to say, cannibalism. If you look at the full color packet I gave you, there are other pictures in there that are so atrocious we didn't even put them up. Worse than what you see. Of people eating human flesh.
And Ray also seems to try to draw inferences between artwork Victoria may have viewed and the murders themselves, saying some of the people depicted had the same hairstyle as Rex Heuermann, or that the bodies of women were positioned in the same way that the Gilgo Beach victims were found.
This is very interesting. Here is a woman. There is a woman who's completely garroted by the horns of a deer head, which is a favorite theme in this picture she's looking at, deer. They have to do with witchcraft. And you can see what's happened to the woman. But notice, there's a marsh in the background, and this woman is laying on her back, just as Shannan Gilbert was found. Make of that what you will.
Make of that what you will. All right, let me pause right here to talk about something. So it's not clear at this point what the purpose of this press conference is, or what the purpose of these allegations are. Is it to provide fuel for potential litigation against the Heuermann family? Is it to present evidence to authorities for potential criminal charges? Because there's one thing to make these kinds of connections between artwork and murders and actual evidence that she was a part of either the killings or a cover-up of the killings that her father is accused of being a part of. Now, it doesn't seem that Ray has presented any evidence of that. Has she done anything wrong? And we're going to get into a moment, because there's a bit of shaky legal territory about making these claims, but let's play a little bit more of this presser.
When you take all of these things collectively, are you going to be able to reasonably say, well, just circumstantial evidence? Who knows whether the mother really knew what was going on in the house? Who knows whether Mr. Heuermann had anything to do with what happened to his daughter? You can take one inference, is that this poor girl was brought up in this sickness. And don't think for 1 minute, from what you now know, that Rex Heuermann was cutting people up, removing their hands and heads and so on, just so that he could avoid identification. That isn't even true. We know he left the tattoos on, he sliced them up. He knew very well he could have just cut them off, and he didn't. He's not caring too much about identification, although he is that too. He's enjoying what he's doing. Look at what he is reading, what his daughter is reading, what they're observing. It's BDSM to the max. And it's demonic. How else do you describe it? This house, are you surprised at the way it looked? It matches the demonic life that they're living there. Why do you think they haven't left after they know that murdered bodies were in that home? There's much more to be said on that. I say to you, you draw the inferences. You draw the inferences. These people are in our society. They're cannibals. They're monsters. They're human devils. They're evil. The Heuermanns are part of that package.
Ray also suggested that the hairs found at the crime scenes could have been from Victoria herself rather than transferred there by her father, and even argued that the DA, Ray Tierney, has no way of knowing for sure. Also at the news conference was Dr. Gary Brucato, a professor of clinical psychiatry who has written several books on serial killers and their upbringings. Here's what he had to say.
I think it's also important to mention that I have not examined Mr. Heuermann, his daughter, his wife, or any other member of the family. And the comments I'm going to make are general about the trends in these kinds of offenders and what we might be able to gauge about someone who may be potentially joining the ranks of that type of individual here.
Now, one of the reporters at the news conference wanted to know, does Dr. Brucato think Rex Heuermann raised his daughter to be a serial killer?
I can't speak to this particular case because I have not examined anyone involved. So far what we have here is circumstantial things that are certainly worth contemplating. I'll say this, among the individuals that do participate with serial killer family members or friends or associates, they seem to divide up into different groups. Some of them have their own perversions and are collaborating because they, in a group, are able to enjoy these things together. And some of them are individuals who have been traumatized or exposed repetitively to these kinds of things and are joining in with the offender, sometimes as a kind of Stockholm syndrome or attempt to survive, sometimes because it's been so desensitized for them that it's become normal in the home or environment in which they're operating. And sometimes there's no relation, that they just are interested in these kinds of unusual things on their own. But you have to take that on a case-by-case basis, and I think it's certainly worth thinking about, because I think we'd agree that what we're seeing here is certainly disturbing.
So Dr. Brucato talked about this normalization. He talked about Stockholm syndrome, where someone who's kidnapped or abused develops this kind of bond or loyalty to the person harming them. And he even brought up other cases, like David Parker Ray, who was accused of torturing and murdering dozens of women, and how Parker Ray's daughter was accused of helping bring those victims there. John Wayne Gacy, who murdered and sexually assaulted 30 men and boys, but how he may have actually been working in a group. So there was a lot of information in that news conference, but as for how much of it is actually credible, that is going to be up for debate. And that brings me to the next point. So Robert Macedonio represents Asa Ellerup, and he said at his own news conference, again, this is legal counsel for Asa, quote, "This is not a circus. This is a man charged with 6 homicides so far that is looking at life without parole. His family, Asa, Victoria, and Christopher, whatever happens to Rex's guilt or innocence, they are collateral damage. Their lives are ruined forever and have been further ruined by actions like John Ray's." Vasilian Mitev, who was once Ray's law partner, represents the children, Victoria and Christopher. He told reporters there's absolutely no evidence that substantiates that the Tumblr page is actually Victoria's. Quote, "What you've heard from an attorney representing someone that's in no way, shape, or form linked in reality with alleged acts was reckless and defamatory. We don't typically respond to frivolous sideshows, but we had to because the reputation and the character of these 2 young children who I represent is unimpeachable. This man is cosplaying as an attorney." Wow. Also, in a now deleted tweet, Sherry Gilbert, this is Shannan Gilbert's sister, posted on X, "This is disrespectful, and I had no prior knowledge to this press conference or the evidence he was presenting today. He should have been there to discuss Shannan's case, period. He cuts his nose to spite his face. I do not support nor condone his actions whatsoever." Suffolk County Police and prosecutors, they've declined to comment about Ray's comments. But when we hear lawyers respond with the words defamatory and reckless, those are legal terms. See, for a defamation claim, we're talking about making a false statement about someone made to at least one other person. I would say if we're talking this case, a press conference would clearly fit that. And if that someone whom the statement or statements are made about is a private individual, not a public figure like a celebrity, all they would need to show is that the statement was made negligently. For public figures, you usually need to show that the person making the statement knew it was false or acted with reckless disregard for the truth. So the law makes it easier and provides greater protection for private individuals than public individuals who are constantly in the public commentary. That's why you only need to show negligence. And I would argue that someone in Victoria's position would probably fall within that private category. And you would also need to show that the statement or statements were harmful to your reputation. And the one thing that stands out a lot is when Ray says that the Heuermanns fit in with the monsters, the cannibals, the evils in our society. Now, there is another argument to be made that this is a matter of public interest. This is a public case, so perhaps that it would fall into this idea of actual malice, that she's not quite a private individual here, that what you really need to show is that the statement was made knowing it was false or was made with reckless disregard for the truth. Now, there is something called defamation per se. So that's when on its face a statement is defamatory. You don't even need to prove that it was harmful to your reputation. It's just a given. And one of the categories of defamation per se is if you're saying someone was involved in a crime. Now, in a defamation lawsuit, a defense would be, of course, this is the truth. I'm not lying. This is not a false statement. And during the course of litigation, as there is discovery and each side hands material over to the other, who knows what could really come out? And many times people don't file lawsuits or they settle lawsuits because they're concerned about what would be discovered. Now, with all that being said, let me be absolutely clear about something. I am not saying that Victoria is or should file any sort of action or that she would even be successful. And I'm, of course, not condoning Ray's statements in any way. But when attorneys use that word defamatory, and when we're listening to these very serious, disturbing allegations, we have to call out what that legal term means and the different avenues this can go. So quite a development in the Rex Heuermann saga. We will, of course, continue to follow the latest for you right here on Sidebar. That's all we have for you right now, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.